Good morning and welcome to Daily Devotions with Pastor Joe. I'm Pastor Joe, and for this lovely November 15th, Thursday, November 15th, 2018, we're getting back into the book of 2 Kings, the story of Elisha, this time Elisha raising the Shunamite's woman. Last time we were here, we talked about how Elisha and the Shunamite woman, how she'd taken good care of him, and he promised her a son, which they did not have a child, to leave their inheritance to. And so he promised her a son. She laughed about it, said, "Don't make a fool of me," basically. And he told her she's going to have a son. And so now we're going to read a little bit further into the story here. 2 Kings 4:18 says, "And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his fathers, to the reapers. And he said unto his father, My head, my head. And he said to a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God, and come again. And he said, Wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It shall be well. Verse 24. Then she saddled an ass, and said to her servant, Drive, and go forward. Slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went, and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, Behold, yonder is that Shunamite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with thy child? And she answered, It is well. 27. And when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet, but Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. And then she said, Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird up thy loins, take my staff in thine hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not. If any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. 31. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child. But there was neither voice nor hearing, wherefore he went again and to meet him, Elisha, and told him, saying, The child is not awakened. When Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead and laid upon his bed. He went in therefore and shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up and laid upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. He stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi, and said, Call the Shunamite. So he called her. And when she was come in unto him, he said, Take up thy son. Then she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and took up her son, and went out. And this is a very interesting story. It's one of the many miracles that we see in Elisha's life. Elisha here had promised her a son as repayment for what they had done for him, and creating the evangelist quarters for him, the minister's quarters, where he could stop in from time to time and take a little leave, take a little break from time to time, and get apart from the world and have a place to rest his head. And that's something that is very wonderful for him during that time. So he promises her that God is going to provide a son for her and her husband. She told him not to deceive her, that it couldn't be, that it's not going to happen. They'd tried and tried, but the child came. Now this comes after that. It says that the child was grown. It fell on a day that he went out to his father, to the reapers. So he was much older by this point in time. And he was out there working with his father, working with the servants in the field, and said, "Oh, my head, my head." So obviously his head was hurting, maybe spinning, in a lot of pain and trouble. I suppose some would have assumed this to be, in modern day, would assume this to be an aneurysm or some kind of a stroke or who knows what. After all, it was probably an awfully hot day. He most likely wasn't a very strong child. And he said to a lad, the father said to a lad, "Carry him to his mother." He sat on his mom's knees until noon and then passed away. And so here she is. They don't have anything else they can do for him. He's complaining of a headache. He's complaining of some serious pains. And he sits on his mother's lap and passes away. So she takes him up to the room that they had prepared for the minister, for Elisha, and says, here he is, lays him on Elisha's bed, and is trusting for God to do some work for him. I would almost kind of assume that she was thinking in the moment she laid him on the bed that would heal him, that there was some sort of an impartation of Elisha's power in the house, in the bed that Elisha had laid on. And there was not, obviously, but we do know that later on in Elisha's life, his bones seemed to still have a presence of God's Holy Spirit upon them, to where when they threw a dead man in, the dead man arose and ran out. But here, God's Spirit wasn't resting on the bed of the man of God in a way to raise this boy from the dead. She laid him there, shut the door, and went out. She didn't want anyone bothering the child. She didn't want anyone to know what happened. She was coming in faith, believing that God could raise the child again. And that's pretty awesome to think. You know, as Christians, we ought to be doing the same. We ought to be, whenever something bad is happening in our lives, that, you know, God has laid it on us that this is a promise of God, and that we can trust in Him to come with the answer. That doesn't necessarily mean we'll never go through sickness. It doesn't mean that whenever someone dies, we can just assume they're going to come back from the dead. But what it means is when God has really given a promise to our souls and to our hearts in something, we can trust Him with the answer. We can trust Him to keep that. The man of God had given this woman this promise of the child, and now the child is taken away before the promise is really at its peak, right? I mean, after all, the child is supposed to be an heir to their inheritance of everything, and that hasn't happened. And so she knows that the promise isn't yet fulfilled, and she's trusting God to finish the promise, to fulfill the promise. She laid him on the bed, went out, she saddled up a donkey, and ran to God, to God's servant, to the man of God, Elisha. And her servant said, "What on earth? It's not a Sabbath. It's not a new moon. It's not a special day. It's not the start of a new month. There's nothing special going on. Why on earth are you going here?" She said, "Don't worry about it. Just go." They went, and Gehazi comes out, says, "Hey, is everything okay with your family? Is your family all right?" She said, "Everything's all right. Everything is well." And that is a quiet testimony of the peace and faith she had in that moment. Obviously, she comes in later and drops at his feet, and she's broken, but she's still coming in faith, believing that God's going to answer the prayer. We don't have to feel unbroken in order to be putting our faith in God. Putting our faith in God doesn't mean that we don't feel broken in those moments, but putting our faith in God means that we're going to trust in Him no matter what the circumstances, even if it hurts so bad and we don't see any way out. And of course, the Lord had hid from Elisha what had really happened. Elisha did not know that the child was dead, did not know that there was a problem. So he sends, he said, "God has hidden it from me." He sends a Gehazi ahead and says, "Gehazi, get dressed, take my staff, don't talk to anybody. If anybody says hello to you, do not answer them back. You just face ahead, go to this child, lay my staff on his head, and that's it, on the face of the child, that's it." And so Gehazi is supposed to be going forward, and we know Gehazi has his issues later on, so we can assume and trust that he has made some mistakes in here. It is perhaps a possibility that Gehazi did salute somebody, that he did take the time to take a break and stop, or whatever it might have been. But Gehazi is supposed to go ahead and salute and go to the child and lay the staff on his face. The mother's child says, and this is reminding me a lot of Ruth and Naomi. She says, "As the Lord lives and as thy soul lives, I will not leave thee." And so Elisha says, okay, gets up and follows her. And it's a good thing she had that persistence in her request. You know, when it comes to our prayers, we need to have more persistence, more care to keep pressing the matter, not to be distrusting, but to keep pressing and saying, God, I'm knocking at the door. I trust in you for this answer, but God, it's important to me. I'm not seeing the answer yet. I trust you've got it, but I want this answer. And so here she is. She says, I'm not leaving your side until I know my child's okay. So he gets up and goes with her. Gehazi passes on before them, so he goes far ahead of them, lays the staff on the child, but the child doesn't come to life. There's no sound, there's no voice, he's not hearing. So Gehazi gets up, walks back out, goes back to meet Elisha and the woman on the way, says, yeah, the child's not awake. He's laying there, and he's not alive. He's not wakened up from touching him with the staff. And so Elisha came to the house and saw the child was dead, and he prayed to the Lord. That was his very first response in the moment when he finally saw the gravity of the situation. As far as we know, the lady hadn't talked to him about it. She just simply said, there's something wrong with my child. Why did you even give me this promise if I'm not going to have my child? So he didn't know what was going on. Maybe he was thinking that Gehazi would just wake the child up. And in this case, once again, God has hidden it from him. So he prays to God and he says, God, my reputation's on the line. Your reputation's on the line. This is something important. This needs to be done. And the next part of what he does is a bit odd. He lays himself face to face with the child, and he stretches his hands out on the kid's hands as he's praying to God, and he's asking God to revive this child. Maybe he's even saying, God, take some of my life and give to the child. And that's how I would be feeling in the moment if it was my son or the son of somebody who was very important to me. And the child began to get warm. A dead person will be cold. There's no warmth there. There's no blood flowing to make the body warm. But it began to get warm. And so he went into the house, walked around a bit, and not sure what to do, maybe hoping God is answering the prayer. Comes back in, stretches himself out again, and all of a sudden the child starts sneezing. And he sneezes 7 times. Some people have assumed maybe that's sneezing out some demons, but I doubt that. I think it was just that he woke up and sneezed 7 times, and it was just so that we would have something neat to talk about. But he opened his eyes. He was awake. He was alive. So he called out and said, Gehazi, get that woman. The woman comes in. He says, take your son. And she went in, fell at his feet, bowed herself to the ground, took up her son, and went out. She gave the proper respect of what was due to the man who had done the work, to the God who had done the work, and went and took the answer and went out in faith. And so just a neat little piece of the story of what Elisha's life was. Another one of the miracles he performed, though a strange one, though a bit different. It is one of the miracles that was performed in Elisha's life. And it's kind of neat. And a couple things we can take away is just to keep pressing, just to keep praying, just to have that faith that says, as God lives, and as the man of God lives there in that case, I will never cease to follow God's way. Sometimes God does hide problems from his people, doesn't want them worrying about it. Sometimes you can have, in the midst of your struggles and trials, you can still have the peace that says everything is all right, just like it is well with my soul. The story of Spurgeon and how his children and his wife had died at sea, and yet he said, it is well. In the midst of all that, he wrote the song, It Is Well With My Soul. So a lot to learn from Elisha, a lot to learn from his life. Next Thursday, as long as everything keeps going right as it seems to be going, Elisha purifies the deadly stew. And that's a very interesting one as well. It's a very neat one that maybe we could talk about a couple of things there. Hopefully we'll be getting back into a daily schedule with this. As I said, things have gotten straightened out a bit. Hopefully they'll stay straightened out. But if you enjoy this content, I encourage you to leave a like in the comments, leave a like and leave a comment in the comment section below. Share this video with a friend and let them know that you enjoy this kind of biblical discussion and things. Leave comments if you have any ideas or thoughts or concerns. We've got a lot of things planned for this channel and a lot of things planned for these videos. Hopefully it all comes to fruition and works out well. Anyway, God bless and have a great day in the Lord. I'll see you again later on another daily devotion with Pastor Joe.